Welcome to the Shattering Inequities Podcast, where we uncover the bold, research-driven strategies that are transforming education for every student, especially those historically left behind. In each episode, we'll highlight leaders who are not just imagining a better future, but actively creating one. Through real-world successes, challenges, and actionable insights, this podcast is a space to crowdsource solutions that advance shattering inequities in education. And now, here's your host, Dr. Robin Avelar La Salle.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Shattering Inequities Podcast, where we believe that every student is entitled to a premium education, no matter where they live, where they go to school, or what their circumstance. I'd like to very excitedly tell you that today's podcast has somebody that's, so special in the field of education and educational justice. And she's here to help us with our two goals. One, to inform and inspire by speaking to people like this one, who has in the first person led initiatives that have made a difference to the very students that we're concerned about in their outcomes. And secondly, to provide an opportunity and a platform for research. We're sure that many of us are doing good work in the field and are having our successes, but like the elephant where everybody's eating one small bite, we're not at all sure that any one source knows the complete comprehensive solution set. And so we're crowdsourcing that by speaking to our guests. So with that, let me introduce to everybody Ofelia Ceja-Lariviere.
Hi, Rob.
Is that right?
Yes, thank you,
Right?
Robin.
Oh, good. We can edit that. I just wanted to be sure I pronounced it right. Okay, good. Ofelia, you have a career that spans a lifetime of doing good deeds, caring for everybody's children. And currently, you serve in the very prestigious position as Executive Director of CALSA. Would you mind telling us a little bit about CALSA?
Gosh, CALSA, the California Association of Latino Superintendents and Administrators, goes way back, almost 30 years, believe it or not. And it started with a small group of male superintendents, not female, male superintendents. Back there, we still look at them as the EGs, but the good old boys club, if you want to call it that. And the reason that they gathered together, it was just one of those meetings where they decided, let's just get together. And you know what? We belong to AXA, but they don't speak to us. And so this group of like maybe 5 or 6 or 7 superintendents got together. And one of them was Carlos Garcia, who is the former retired superintendent from San Francisco, who masterminded together with others. And I'm not going to mention all of them, but that's technically how it started. And slowly it started growing. And when I came on board, I remember there was a conference that we used to have. All they did is once a year, a conference, and it was called, So You Want to Be a Superintendent. That was the catch. So if you want to be a superintendent, we used to meet in San Diego, Torrey Pines. It was like, wow, you felt special, right? Because you're now amongst these superintendents that for me was like, wow, yeah, maybe one day, but it was like a far cry, right? But every year they have that conference. So you want to be a superintendent, and every year it attracted new people like myself who want to come and just hang out with what you look up to these people, right? They were running school districts. And so the conversation would empower you to, yeah, I think I could do that. Why not? And more, they started encouraging more people like myself to come together. And so I became part of, back then, we didn't call them regional directors, but it was like a regional directors. And so I was in Southern California, worked with Pomona Unified School District. I was a principal, and I could help. And I remember the first opportunity I had was working. We had a networking event at Cal Poly Pomona, brought in all of the administrators from the area. And that's how it started, again, as an opportunity, CALSA, to inspire and build capacity and encourage others to consider one day becoming superintendents, running school districts that we knew were working with students like myself that look like me. And how do we bring the quality of the education up from where we started? Because what I remember growing up as a student, it wasn't until I was at the university level that I realized that the quality of my education had in no way matched what some of my peer students that were at the university had. And so it was kind of like that. How do we encourage not just to improve the achievement of our students, but also to encourage leaders potentially to improve the achievement of those schools that they're running, those districts that they're running, so that at the end, it's all about improving the quality of education for Latinx students. So that's, Robin, I hope that answers some of your question.
Absolutely. And I remember some of the OG males. I love them dearly. And then now you've all taken over. And in all of these years, it's gone from those 6 people to how many strong now is the organization?
So we are almost 800 strong. And again, my goal as the executive director is that we surpass that, because is there more than 1,000 Latino, Latinx administrators? Yes, there is. But believe it or not, we're still not there. There are still Latinx administrators that I come across and it's, oh, what is CALSA? We're still not noticed by others. If you say what is AXA, people know what that is.
So for those who don't know, AXA is
the Association of California School Administrators, right? Where most of us belong, because I didn't come to CALSA first. I came to AXA first. As an administrator, it was just, that's the thing you do. And so CALSA came later when I realized, oh, there is somebody that can speak about who I am and who has the same values and culture that I do. But again, there's still that gap out there that they don't know who we are. And so our goal in CALSA right now is to build that capacity. And the way that we're hoping to do that is through our mentoring program. Our mentoring program is one of the strongest mentoring program in any organization. And so we're on cohort 21. And so it's been from beginning. And you know what, Robin, our first cohort, you have the likes of Dr. Thelma Melendez de Santana, who became Assistant Secretary of Education. She was part of that first cohort. So are we proud? Yes. Will there be more Dr. Melendez is out there? Yes. And I truly believe that our newest cohort, which will be introduced at this year's Summer Institute in Chula Vista, one of those little cohorts, one of those little proteges will one day become another Secretary of Education if we still have the federal government in place. But if not there, here in our state, who knows? They may become state superintendent of education. So I truly believe that that's what we're building, empowering people like ourselves to.
That's remarkable, Ofelia. I wonder about this. You're hinting already at what part of the solution to helping students who historically don't achieve at the same level as others, which in the nation is largely low socioeconomic and Latino and kids of color, and also co-labeled with many other labels at the same time. And one of the things I remember early on with AXA, the umbrella or largest organization for administrators in the state, and CALSA when it started, is that it felt a little bit exclusive. And I remember when I was a young administrator, I thought, oh, I'm not a networker and I'm not a schmoozer. You get the idea of the Grand Poobah and conventions and Fred Flintstone, and that if that's what they do, like I'm about getting the work done. I want to turn lives around for children that were raised and look a lot like me, not just Latino, but largely. But it's not like that anymore. What has changed in the organization that makes it different?
And having been part of that back then and having part where we are now, I think one of the things that we realize is that you can't live on one conference alone. I can't just come for a homecoming once a year. Honestly, and then we don't always come to the homecoming because something happens. We realize that California is so big, right? So if I'm in the north, but the conference is in the south, my district may be a tiny little school district and they may not be able to fund my going to that conference. Or if I really care enough, I could pay for it myself, but oftentimes that's not doable. And so one of the things that we realize is that, you know what, we need to engage our members. If I'm part of CALSA and I say to you, what do I get for my membership? What is it? Once a year homecoming, once a year conference? No, there has to be more to that. And we realize that if we don't help each other by providing more professional development that really matters to them about the work that they're doing back at home, because it is about the work. Sometimes as a principal or an assistant principal, I can't get away because there's work to be done. But I want to make sure that what I'm doing in my school side or whatever I'm doing, it's of quality, but how do I keep up with my growth as a leader, right? Sometimes I can't get away, and I love getting away and being able to come back and feel refreshed, but sometimes that's not always possible. So for us in CALSA is you don't need to go over there. What if we could bring it to you? Whether it's in the form of a webinar, what if it's in the form of a seminar, what if it's in the form of opportunities like 4 times a year where you could meet and then go back and practice what you learned and then come back and share with us what worked and what didn't work. And what if we were to empower you in that way? Would that help? And so what we're finding is that more and more, that's more relevant to people. That's more accessible to people, because I can't always go to the once a year homecoming where I have to pay more than $1,000 to go. Whereas I could go to my local area, my local region, and even that is still too big. But what if I could go just 30 minutes from home or my school or an hour to get this amazing opportunity to hear from Robin Avelar La Salle, right? Wow. And I could come back and immediately put it in place, put it in practice with my staff, with my teachers, with my community. That's going to make a difference. That's the difference now, Robin, that we're hoping that our members are feeling like they don't have to go away. They could have it accessible to them through a webinar, through a seminar, through a series. Yes, I can still go to the homecoming and get all dressed up and meet the people that I've not seen for the year, but that's a little bit different. I need more than that to fill my spirit, to fill my who I am, my buckets.
So what I'm realizing as you're talking and I'm reflecting back on my career within the system in the school district, I don't know if people who are not administrators or leaders in whatever capacity, certainly in schools or school districts, maybe outside of that, realize a couple of things. One, it's very lonely. It's very lonely, particularly if you're bent on overturning historic patterns of achievement by demographic group. It's not like everybody you meet is like-minded, and it's very taxing personally and in your spirit. It's very draining. And I see that what you've done is to recognize that and create a safe haven for like-minded people, or people who are curious-minded, even if they're not like-minded yet, but to learn, which I think is invaluable. The other thing people might be surprised, and you tell me if I was the only one who experienced this, is whatever your previous job was, you were an awesome teacher, so you're tapped to be the next job, assistant principal or something, and you don't know how to do that job. Your administrative credential does not prepare you for the practical on-the-job realities of any of the jobs. It's general leadership information and management. And so then you go into that and then you have to figure it out largely alone in isolation. And you really can't be vulnerable in your own place of work when you've been elevated to that position. Was that just me?
No, you are speaking, bringing back memories of when I started my career as an administrator. And I was a very young administrator. I was a principal at 30. So very young. And it was not just a small school, it was a multi-track year-round school back then. And so as a new principal, was I freaked out? Of course I was freaked out, because it's like, now everything's on you, right? You have to prove that you can do this job. And so oftentimes my colleagues, because I was young, guess what? My colleagues in my school district were much older than I was. But it was that mentality back then of, you had either been the director of athletics or you had been whatever. It wasn't necessarily instructional leadership that they were looking for back in those days. And they were still in the system. I remember some of my colleagues were like ready to retire, some of them. And so could I go to them and ask them? No, because I knew better. And so you reach out, right? You try to get involved and go to these leadership sessions where you're coming back and putting in place what you're learning. So it was really difficult to go to those groups because, believe it or not, they also had their own little good old boys club, right? That were doing their thing. So you feel isolated. You feel like the system is not there. Now, oftentimes, guess what? I didn't ask. I decided I'm not asking, I'm just doing. So I would just come and do what I needed to do. And I figure if they didn't like it, they could slap my hand. I was ready for that. You have to take the risks. I took those risks. Did I ever get in trouble? Yeah, I got in trouble for like little insignificant things. And then I moved on. Okay, whatever. So to the point where I took a brand new school, and it was a brand new school that I was assigned to, took that school into 3 years later into a California distinguished school. So guess what? After that, nobody gave me trouble. Nobody said anything. If I needed to put in a new initiative, they didn't ask. It's okay. It's just Ofelia doing her thing. So, anyway, sometimes you have to take those risks. Don't be afraid.
Clearly, you've led movements where you had direct impact on the kids that you served. And now what you're doing is cultivating a whole generation of non-traditional looking, non-traditional seeming leaders who have a heart for historically vulnerable kids. And I can attest, having attended both the prom as well as the trainings, how rich the content knowledge is, how acceptable it is to be a learner, how elevated you feel because of your identity, how challenged the idea of the imposter syndrome is there. It's a beautiful thing. I'm remembering in the last book we wrote, Where Equity Lives, there's, after having studied 300 baseline system studies to try and understand what systems best explain these gaps in student outcomes, one of the primary findings is that we have Christmas tree effect in schools, which is lots of decorations. We are so jam-packed with solutions that, oh my gosh, it is physically and humanly impossible to implement all of the initiatives and programs and materials that we have in any one place with any kind of quality to make a difference for students. And there is a point of diminishing returns. And in that research, the finding is that the rationale as to why is it that we have like throwing everything, like they say, throwing everything on the wall and seeing what sticks. It comes down to us that the leaders just lack one thing, and that is the depth of knowledge to be able to discern another great idea from the design that's perfect for your context. And so I wonder if that resonates with you. It's sounding like maybe CALSA's primary mission, at least one of them, is that.
No, it's, boy, you speak my language, Robin, and you speak to what my colleague Martha Martinez, who is retired now as a CALSA co-executive director, would always talk about. How do we provide our members with that depth of knowledge, right? So it's not just surface, because you could be surface level, but unless you really understand the depth of what you're talking about, you can implement it, but it's not going to go anywhere. And guess what? Teachers are really smart. Teacher leaders are really smart. Oftentimes, as leaders, it's not that we have to convince them, but there's always this doubt about, is she really knowledgeable enough, or is he really knowledgeable about what they're asking me to put on my plate? One more thing on my plate. And teachers get tired of that because they understand that probably somebody told my principal that we needed to do this from up there someplace, but guess what? They don't even know what it is. So how are they coming into my classroom and evaluating my depth of knowledge on this topic when they don't even understand it themselves? So then there goes that validation, there goes that trust, there goes that respect, there goes everything. And then as a teacher, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to pretend I'm doing it, but it's not going to be something that I ever going to put in place with fidelity, right? Because it's about fidelity too. And so as leaders, yes, it's like we need to make sure that whatever it is that we're doing, that we have that depth of knowledge, that we understand it. And don't take all these things. Just because you hear of a new term doesn't mean that you're now going to put everything on the table, on the menu for the teachers. No, it's like select those things that really mean for what's the data telling you at your school? What is it that you really need? Don't just come with ideas. If it's one thing, then do that. Understand it. Get to know what it means. And then have your teachers, you be a learner too with them. Don't just bring Robin into the picture, have her instruct and show teachers all this amazing stuff, but then you're not even there.
Right.
So then you don't understand. No, if I really care about my students and achievement, then I'm going to be part of the team that understands what it is that we're wanting to do and put in place. But don't give me a menu of like a buffet where no, you have to be focused. What is it that the data is telling you? What is it that your students really need? And then dwell on that depth, and then really make sure that there's fidelity to what you're asking them to do. And then just stick with that. You know how many people like, no, okay, now what do you want me to do? I haven't even, anyways, you know what I'm talking about.
No, I'm thinking of Sandy Thorstensen, also part of your club, who we spoke with. And one of her many one-liners, which are brilliant, was stay the course, darn it. Just stay the course. And she doesn't mean 1 year, 3 years. The success of her district, which is still best in class with the same kids we're talking about, is 15, 20, 25 years sticking to the bones, the architecture that was originally designed, and they're just getting better and better at it. And the other wonder I have is you mentioned the importance of leaders being credible to the people they're leading. I remember a professor once at Cal State LA, one of my alma maters, who I love so much, Dr. Hernandez. He was also a naval officer, reserve. And he said, to be a leader is not to charge up the hill. It's to charge up the hill and look around you and see if there's anybody else around you. Like you must inspire followership to be a leader. Your title does not make you a leader. Many leaders have no titles, and yet they are the most impactful humans on the planet. So I think about, in order to inspire followership, particularly when you're challenging the status quo, when you're really saying, you know what, historically, certain groups have always been at the bottom rung of the achievement ladder, but it's not because they're any less capable. It's because the system is built to, at the very least, maintain that, if not caused it initially, and sometimes even exacerbate it. You have to have the credibility to inspire followership. How do you think, what if you were to be speaking to potential leaders or leaders in the field who have the same mission to ensure every child gets that premium education so they graduate with every life option? What would be part of the solution set you would suggest to them about being the kind of leader that inspires followership?
First of all, I think that you have to look at your own values, who you are. What are my values, right? Because I work with a lot of leaders. And I can't say that everyone, even though sometimes we think we have the same values, we don't have the same values, right? And we don't, depending on the politics, depending on where you are, but I think that ethically, you have to remember who you are. And then when you do that, and when you're working with a community, you have to be real. You have to really be real, because if you're not real, you're not going to inspire anybody. It's like you said earlier, titles don't mean anything, really. They don't mean anything. It's what you do. It's boots on the ground. It's what you model, right? That's what people look at. They don't look at, I could be the superintendent, but if I never show up at any of my schools, do you know I used to have a superintendent when I was a principal, that he was a superintendent, and I knew him because there was a picture on my lobby. That's the superintendent. And so most of the teachers never ever saw him in person. They just knew that's the superintendent. And so is that inspirational? Just a picture? No, you have to get down and dirty and really show that you really value the work that you're doing, that you value what others are doing around you. That's inspirational when I see somebody who is not afraid to do the work with me, and I could get down and dirty with them, and I see that they're doing the same thing. That inspired me about them too. It inspired me to see community members getting involved in their school or in their school district. I need to be inspired too as a leader. I'm not just the only one. We need to work as a team. And so what I would tell young people coming up the ranks is that if you're willing to get down and dirty and be part of the people that you're serving, then you're going to be okay. But if you think that just because you're now an assistant principal or a director or whatever, that's going to inspire because of your title, no, it's not. And guess what? They'll respect the fact that you are the director or the principal or whatever, but they won't follow you. When it comes down to, I'm just going to do what I'm needed to do, but I'm not going to do any extra. If you think I'm going to, no. And that to me, Robin, means more than anything. As a leader, when I was a principal, we just did things because we knew it was what was good for kids. And guess what? Those people, those teachers that I worked with back then, we're still in touch. We still connect with each other. They still call me Mrs. Lariviere. I'm like, you know what? I'm Ofelia to you guys. No, you're still Mrs. Lariviere. I'm like, oh goodness. Okay. But again, it's because we work together. That for me, they inspired me, and hopefully I inspired them to the point where some of them are now principals, assistant superintendents, and I have a couple that became superintendents themselves. So that to me is, what you want to do. You want to build that capacity regardless of where you are. Of course, for me and CALSA is to build that But I hope that even if I'm an assistant principal, I want to build capacity with my teacher leaders. If I'm a principal, I want to build capacity with those that I work with my community. One of my community members, when I was a principal, he was my president of my PTA. He became assembly person in the state of California. That to me is building capacity, right? Building. Some of them they were in my school site council. And it's like, hey, you know what? You're doing a great job. Why don't you run for board? It's like, think so? But I hardly speak English. No, run for board. And guess what? They did. And they won. And so it doesn't matter whether it's parents, students, teachers, other administrators. It's that helping each other build that capacity. And yes, you know what? I've also met others that don't think that way. They think that of just moving up the ladder. And they could move up the ladder, but I am so sorry. They could move up the ladder, but it's not long lasting.
It doesn't change lives for kids. No, it doesn't. Ofelia, you are one of the leaders, I say, on whose shoulders I stand proudly. And I hope to provide shoulders for others, and on it goes. That's what you exemplify to so many. Can you tell us what life experiences made Ofelia the Ofelia of today that we're meeting right now? And can you pepper that with at least one story of a not on my watch experience sometime in your life that brought you to what you're doing right now?
I'm an immigrant. I don't know if you know that I am an immigrant. I was born in Mexico, in Michoacan, Jiquilpan, Michoacan, to be exact. And so my parents immigrated to this country when I was 9. I'm one of actually 8. I'm the oldest of 8, but my parents lost 2 in Mexico and hence moved to the United States after those tragedies. So, of course, when I came to the United States, I was fortunate enough, unlike some of my students that I came across, that I was literate. I did go to school in Mexico, so I was at grade level and probably moved. When I came to the United States, I probably surpassed in the area of math, because math was more universal. It's universal, right? But so came to the United States, not speaking English, maybe knowing 1 or 2 like hola, a few of the simple words. And I entered the United States school system in 4th grade. And we lived in East LA, right? One of the schools in East LA. I'm trying to remember the name of the school. I think it's right off the freeway, Reagan Elementary. I don't even know if it's still there. But anyways, my parents lived in that community. We did have sponsors that helped my dad and my mom come to the United States. But anyways, my dad takes me to enroll us in school. And back in my days, there was not too many translators. People still was not like now. And so I remember my dad was very young. And so they thought he was my brother instead of my father. And so he's like, no, that's my daughter. She's my oldest and stuff. Anyways, 4th grade. And of course, there was no bilingual education in those days. And so for the most part, this theory about listening, like
reading, writing.
Right. So that was me. I did a lot of listening. At the beginning, I just didn't know what I was just sitting there. And so when you talk about systems, I could see that the teacher had a system for everything. Monday, you do this, especially like in the area of spelling. Monday, you do this. Tuesday, you do that. Wednesday, you go to the dictionary. Anyways, at the end of the week, it was always the test, right? The famous test. And so I remember that it was like I watched and I learned and I got my list and I thought I could do this. I memorized these words because unlike what she should have been doing is mixing up the words to make sure that the kids knew exactly what they were learning. She just did them in order. It was like the number 1 was the same number 1 at the end of the week as, so I could do this. So I memorized those vocabulary words. And so at the end of the week, this is like after I had learned the system, I realized I can do this. And so I took the test just like everyone else. And I was the only one in class that got 100%. But she knew I didn't speak English. She knew. It's like, how could she get 100%? She doesn't speak. And so anyways, I remember that situation because when she realized I had 100%, and I don't know what she exactly told me, but I know that she was thinking I was cheating. I could tell by the tone of her voice that she was accusing me of cheating, even though my neighbors did not get 100%. And so for me, it crushed my spirit, right? Because I had studied so hard to memorize those words that for her, I could tell she was not happy and she was angry that I was cheating. And so that experience right there, Robin, to this date, it hasn't escaped me. It hasn't left me. It traumatized me to the point where it probably forced me even more to try harder as a non-English speaker to learn and do. And so as I got older, I realized that, you know what? I want to be a teacher. I want to be a teacher to the point where I don't want others to ever have to feel like I did. If you're a non-English speaker, there has to be someone that could help you. And so that's what led me to education, to want to be helping others like me that come from other countries and don't speak the language and be treated with respect, not like secondhand citizens that you're not capable of doing. And so anyways, long story short, by the time I became a sixth grader, guess what? We used to have these little playground safety kids that used to monitor like the little like certain games. And I was in charge of all of these safety students. And so anyways, that was like, I can do this. And so, but that little trauma, Robin, is why I continue to see out there. And even in my administrative career, when I was assistant soup at Inglewood Unified School District, and I would visit the schools, I could still see remnants of that still happening. And I am so sure that it still is happening. It hasn't changed. But who helps the kids? Do we have that heart to help kids like ourselves? Maybe you didn't come as an immigrant to this country. Maybe you were born here, but you have Latino background. Your family is a Latino and you spoke Spanish at home. Do you have the heart when working with the kids to understand that it's not about, I didn't have a choice when my parents immigrated. I didn't have a choice as to what school I went to. I didn't have a choice as to what teacher I had. I didn't. Did I have someone who gave me a hand and said, it's okay, you can do it? And we need more people like that. We need more people. And I hope that there's people out there. I know there is. I think that if anything in CALSA, our members, whether you're Latino or not, I don't care, is that we want you to help our brown kids out there because they need help. They need to know that someone's out there willing to help them become the potential leaders that they can become in the future.
And it is the case that a third of California students are at the lowest achievement levels. A half are not doing well, but a third are really at the lowest. And of those, 80% are Latino low socioeconomic kids. So you're speaking because of the population here. The other thing you just mentioned, which I think is important, is CALSA members and the leaders that you are cultivating come from all sorts of backgrounds. And I did not know that, but that is the case. I've seen it firsthand. And what you're doing is cultivating people that have heart and spirit and are willing to challenge the status quo on behalf and advocate for, champion for all children who are not doing well because the system is not allowing them to thrive, which is a beautiful thing. There's something else that we wrote about in Shattering Inequities, the first book, that I'm listening to you and I'm seeing this picture in my head. One of the equity hooks or one-liners in that book is, "A star does not a constellation make." And the idea there is that it's not good enough anymore to have one great leader here, one great leader there, one champion for all kids on the other side of the country. But that what we need is the beauty of an entire constellation of like-minded people and ably prepared with that depth of knowledge and that leadership finesse to be able to pull it off. Would you agree? How do you think about that?
Oh my gosh, I so agree with you. We need constellations. We need a lot of them. There's more than one in the universe.
Yeah.
There's lots. And I think that one of the things that we need to do is learn from others. Like, for example, Finland supposedly has a great school system, right? We can learn from them. Mexico has a great system. We can learn from them. Puerto Rico, right? But we need to come together and we need to connect those dots, because sometimes we don't connect the dots. You have pockets of excellence in one area, but it's not everywhere. You spoke about Whittier Union High School District. Amazing. I always wanted to grow up to be like Sandy. It was like, she was an amazing leader, right? But I know she wasn't the only leader around. And yet, it's how do we connect the dot? How do we connect what she's doing to others so that we could emulate what she was doing? How do we emulate what happens sometimes in New York? Because they also have their own little constellation over there. How do we become a universe? So it's not just constellations or planets within that constellation or star. Like, we have a lot, but how do we connect to Zatu so that we become a universe and not just a constellation over here or over there? And then we don't know how to space travel yet, but we could definitely start our own. We could start traveling ourselves, figuring out how to do that, because there's so much to learn from each other that we still don't know. And it doesn't mean that it's just about our Latinx students. Sometimes when I hang out and I talk to my colleagues at CALSA or at Campo.
Can you define those, please?
I'm sorry, CALSA, the California Association of African American Administrators. CAPO, the California Association of
Pacific,
thank you, Islanders Administrators. All of them, we all are there for a purpose. But hello, they may be constellations themselves. CALSA could be a constellation or school, but we need to connect ourselves to become a universe, right? A more uniform, and we're expanding. Just like the universe, we're expanding, but it doesn't mean that we separate each other as we expand. We need to figure out how to come together. And I think that's really important. Sometimes we want to be our own little universe instead of a constellation. I have my own universe. You have your own universe, but we're part of this constellation that we need to bring together. And again, we're not space travelers in the sense of that, but can we come up with somehow, how do we travel, right? Hey, we could make our own space shuttle and work with each other. Why not? And so that, Robin, is like so needed out there, right?
So much value that you bring to this episode, Ofelia, and I'm thinking sometimes, and most often, when we think about historically underserved students or lower achieving groups, we go directly to teacher training. We just need to teach teachers how to teach reading better. And what you're highlighting is how much more is involved in that. Teachers they're not the decision makers that set the conditions for them to be able to teach this methodology or that methodology, but they do not make the decisions that influence their context. Leaders do, or outside of classroom people do in so many capacities. And what you're dedicating this chapter of your life to is developing, and I heard you say, the heart, the spirit, the depth of knowledge in the adults who support the conditions so that students can thrive. I think that is a very profound solution set that we don't appreciate nearly enough. And you've taken an organization from a small networking sort of club almost to a place that mentors, that provides deep professional learning, and that by connection places these stars into developing constellations. And that's a vision beyond what I think most people think about. So thank you for bringing that forward. I'm not sure we would have thought this way otherwise. You are a gift, an inspiration.
Well, Robin, thank you.
In word and deed, Ofelia, I thank you from the bottom of my heart and from the bottom of the hearts of all the children and all the communities that you've served and you continue to serve. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your experience, and your scholarship with our audience. To our audience, we welcome your participation, your comments, your questions, your case studies to add to this crowdsourcing research project that we have. And Ofelia, until the next time, I'm sure we will meet again. Thank you, and all my love for everything and more. Thank you.
Robin, you're most welcome, but I want to say that your leadership, your inspiration out there, because you are the reason that we're connecting dots. And so continue to do that, because as administrators, sometimes we don't always see the big picture. We see I'm so sorry. Sometimes we don't see the big picture. Sometimes we're so into the forest that we no longer see like the trees and stuff. But Robin, you have provided us those connectors. And anytime you're around us, you bring new light. You help us to see the things that we're no longer seeing. And sometimes because we're so into the weeds that we don't see from the outside in. And so thank you for that, because you are part of what we need more of. And so I hope that there's more Robins out there. And I know that you're creating leaders on your own end as well. And so we can't do it alone. Nobody can do it alone. And if anybody thinks that they could do it alone, they're wrong, because you're going to be very lonely and you're going to feel very lonely. And so you need to bring more Robins into our world. We need to bring more thought-minded leaders like ourselves together so that we could start figuring out what these systems, how can we make these systems better? Because the system that worked 10 years ago is no longer really the reality. We need to start being able to be the lifelong learners that we always talk about. And sometimes we forget to do that. But systems change, students change, teachers change. The teachers that I had back then are no longer the same teachers that I deal with, or that my administrators, because I'm also a leadership coach, and when I go visit their schools, it's not the same. And so we need to be able to change. We need to be our own AIs of the world. If we can't figure it out, then we're in trouble. But again, we need people like yourselves to help us see it, because we're so into it that sometimes, oh, I didn't see that. And then you come in and you share that with us. And so thank you for that knowledge. Thank you for keeping us abreast.
The very kind words, but back at you 20 times. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Until next time, everybody.
Shattering Inequities requires more than conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future of education together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for all students. Thanks for listening.